Describe your experience, if any, with students with special needs.
The situation that I would like to talk about for this one is a student that I had in my grade 2 practicum. And this student had mild hearing loss, mild to moderate hearing loss. And it was really interesting. When I first went into my practicum, I was very nervous to work with this student because I didn't know what this mild hearing loss would do in regards to my teaching plan. I didn't really know how those two things would either mesh or create some serious conflict and needing some accommodation. And so I think there was a lot of fear around working with a student with some kind of a disability at first, just because I was uncertain about how this actually affected her learning. And so I realized that as I went on and developed a relationship with this student, there was actually a lot of fear that just left in just developing this relationship with the student because I knew her in a different way. And there was no fear, obviously, when you know the student, right? And so I just began to use some strategies that my teacher had suggested, such as using open-ended questions to ensure her comprehension and making sure that I look at her face-to-face in interactions so that she can actually do some lip reading. And it was kind of interesting. This relates back to my pedagogy about relationships with students, and I believe it's so important that you have a solid relationship with your students, but I think even more so with your students who have some kind of a disability that inhibits their learning. And I think this is just because some teachers in the past, or anyone, could have said that you can't do this because they have this disability, or it could just be a self thing that they know that they have a disability and they just feel that they can't do it. So I think that having a teacher that really just backs them up in that and in their learning is super important.
How would you provide support for a student with a reading disability in a classroom of 20 to 25 students?
I find these questions really difficult when I don't have a specific student in mind, but because I think my strategies that I would use with a student like this would be so specific to the way that that student learns and the amount that their disability inhibits their own learning. So for my case, in talking about this question, I'm just going to actually create a case where we have a child who has actually been diagnosed with some kind of cognitive disability that is affecting their area of phonemic awareness. And so in my pedagogy, I really believe that teachers are not alone when they're working with students that have disabilities. I really feel that the whole school needs to come together and really support the teacher and the student. So this is things like principals, staff, parents, and any educational assistants that are available for those grades. And I would definitely make sure that I would be in communication with the EAs who are working with this student, probably on a weekly basis at least, if not daily. And we would be targeting certain skills for meetings with those students. And I would definitely be in communication with parents about potential things that they can do at home and providing resources with this parents to work with their child on the skills that they need to be targeting. And then for personally working one-on-one with this student, I would be sure to ask tiered questions because I would have to cater to where they're at in their learning. I wouldn't want to ask questions that just confuse them. And asking these questions to make sure that there is a level of comprehension there, as well as obviously if we're dealing with phonemic awareness, letter sounds, and things like blends and digraphs we would be working on. That's what I would be sure to be working on one-on-one with this student when I have that time that I'm spending with the student. So with all of these specific supports and strategies and involvement of the whole school, that's how I would deal with a situation like that.
Let's say you have a student that you suspect has ADHD in your class. How would you go about addressing your concerns with the student's parents?
Well, the first thing that I would do is definitely make sure that I have some times documented and some evidence of this behavior happening in my classroom before I would ever even think about talking to the parents about this, about their child potentially having ADHD. This is a very sensitive issue. And I would then, once I have my evidence, talk to my admin and make sure that they're on the same page, that they know about the student and what I've been experiencing with this student in my classroom. And then I would arrange an SLT meeting with parents, myself, resource teacher, EA, whichever has been working more with the student and knows about the situation. And then in that meeting, I would definitely focus on describing behavior, not diagnosing their child, obviously. And I would definitely be sharing that evidence that I collected in my classroom with the parents and asking them if they've ever seen that behavior at home, actually. Because if I'm seeing it in the classroom, it's probably not the only place that it's coming up. And at the end of the meeting, I would just simply want to create some strategies. And these strategies would be time sensitive. So I would say, we're going to give these strategies a month, and then we will have another meeting and we'll see how the strategies are going. So at this time, I would mention nothing to the parents about ADHD and nothing about an assessment, because frankly, it's too early to say if they're going to need an assessment, especially if the child is in kindergarten up to grade 2. So if the parents ask about an assessment because they just know about that and they've had friends who have done it, I would simply communicate to the parents that I would like to try as many strategies as I feel necessary until I would ever consider an assessment, because that's a big step. And at this point in time, I'm only suspecting that the child might have qualities of another child that would have ADHD, but at this point I am not certain. And so my focus would be on developing some strategies that we could use and that I could use in the classroom to try and do something so we don't have to go forward with an assessment. So that's how I would address my concerns to the parents.
Describe your approach to making academic accommodations for students with disabilities. What do you say to a student who feels the accommodations give other students an unfair advantage over others?
My approach to this student would simply be to paint a scenario for them. I would say, well, Joey, he needs glasses because he can't see the whiteboard when it's far away. And you can. So we gave Joey glasses because we knew that he needed them so he could be just as successful as you are. So do you think we should give you glasses just to make sure that it's fair? And then I would simply explain, no, that would be silly. Why would we give you glasses when you don't need them? So then I would simply tell my students that every child in my classroom gets what they need in order to succeed. So each child does not necessarily receive the same accommodation, but they will get the help that they need to succeed in their learning.
How would you make your classroom an inclusive environment for a student with autistic spectrum disorder?
Well, students who are on the spectrum for autism actually can display a wide range of behaviors depending on where they are located on the spectrum. So I love a quote by Mark Atkinson. He says, if you've met one student with autism, you've met one student with autism. And I think that's just so true because each student is so different. But in my classroom, I would definitely have different supports in place depending on where the student landed. And just hypothetically now, some of those might be making sure that there's a consistent routine every day and trying to eliminate any possible changes into that routine. And then also just having a quiet space available somewhere in the classroom would be probably really beneficial for this student. And any time that I get to be able to model communication properly would be beneficial, as students with autism tend to lack in the social skills. So I would also teach at a slow enough pace that I would be able to highlight the key concepts, having things like visual cues and maybe asking for more like written stuff as opposed to oral, because some can be nonverbal. And reading stories that actually target some social skills might be a good idea. And lastly, providing some free time after they've done a really difficult task, because this is rewarding them for putting the effort in. So those are just a few of the things that I would do.
At a parent-teacher interview, a parent suggests that you spend too much time with students with special needs in your classroom and feels that you are not providing full support for their child. They are quite upset with what they feel is an active disservice to their child and is, in their mind, a clearly preferential approach to students with special needs. How would you respond to this parent?
First, I would definitely agree with the parent that it's not okay to neglect supporting students in your classroom. And then I would simply say that in my classroom, every student receives the support they need to have an equal chance of success. So at that point in the conversation, I would start to ask them, well, what are your needs for your child? As clearly, like, you're feeling I'm not meeting them. So please tell me, what are the needs that you have, and what are the concerns that you have about your child, and how can I meet those needs? And then I would have a conversation about the different ways that I could accommodate and meet their needs, and just calm that, because they're obviously very concerned. So we would discuss about whatever it is that they are bringing up, and making sure that both parties are satisfied in the end. But I would definitely leave the parents with a thought, just by telling them that I believe in an inclusive classroom where everyone receives what they need, and my job is to set up students for an equal chance of success.